The FDA's top vaccine official, Dr. Peter Marks, has announced his resignation from the agency. In his departure letter, he underscored the importance of vaccinations, particularly for measles, and referenced what he called misinformation and lies of HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Check out the vaccine stocks today. You can see they're down across the board, but then again, so's the broader market. However, Moderna shares are off by about 12.4%. Joining us right now is former FDA Commissioner Dr. Scott Gottlieb. He's also a CNBC contributor and on the boards of both Illumina and Pfizer. And Dr. Gottlieb, walk us through how you read this.
Well, look, I have no reason to believe that the public reporting about the circumstances related to his departure is wrong, and a lot of that reporting related to perceived grievances that Secretary Kennedy had over the vaccine approval process and that division at FDA, and a desire on his part to try to get new leadership in there that he'd be able to influence. And that's what the press reported. I think for a lot of people who work in the innovation
Dr. Marks
space...
being asked to leave, basically. Told he can either resign or be fired.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That was the reporting over the weekend. I think for a lot of people who work in the innovation space, equally profound to Peter Marks' contributions on vaccine approvals and the renaissance that we've seen in new vaccines over the last really 2 decades was his impact on cell and gene therapy. He presided over the modern creation of that field, presided over the first approval of a gene therapy for an inherited form of blindness, a drug called Luxturna, which was approved when I was at FDA. It presided over the approval of Casgevy, the first CRISPR-based therapeutic for sickle cell disease. He presided over the approval of Kymriah, a drug that was approved about 3 months after I got to FDA for the treatment of a pediatric form of leukemia. It is a cure for many patients and was the first gene therapy approved in the United States. I remember briefing President Trump about that impending approval and how enthused he was that the first gene therapy product was going to be approved on his watch. Peter really presided over the creation of the modern framework for the approval of those products. There's many more in the pipeline. There's about 2,000 cell and gene therapies in the pipeline right now. About 300 are in phase 1 clinical trials, about 35 in phase 3 clinical trials. So these are in advanced stages of development. And I think for a lot of innovators, they knew that Peter was working on a lot of policies that were going to help expedite these products to the market and make the process for development far more efficient. I think for a lot of innovators today, they're very worried about what the status is of that review program at FDA now that Peter has left. And there's going to be a lot of departures behind Peter. There'll be other people leaving that division and that center this week, and those announcements are going to be forthcoming.
Is that something that you think RFK Jr. is targeting as well, or you just think that that is incidental, damage along the way that comes with this?
Yeah, no, it's a casualty. I'm not even sure how aware he is of the full scope of the authority that Peter exercised inside FDA. He also oversaw the entire regulation of the blood industry in the United States, and so FDA does over 100 inspections of blood facilities in the United States. Peter had just presided over new regulations that got implemented on blood donations, allowing veterans to donate blood who had served in Europe for the first time in a very long time because of prior prohibitions on that. So he also oversaw that portfolio as well. So it wasn't just vaccines. I suspect Senator Kennedy is entirely focused on the vaccine portion of that portfolio, but it has a much broader scope than that and touches a lot of lives.
When it comes to vaccines, what is your general feeling about where we're headed on this front? Measles, I didn't realize, is now in something like 27 states.
That's right. We have, I think, 23 cases now in Kansas, 11 in Ohio. I think it's in, 23 states that you mentioned. I think the scope of the outbreak is much larger in West Texas than what's being reported. There's perhaps thousands of cases there. And I think we're going to have potentially an acceleration this week. We'll have to see what happens in this week in states like Kansas and Ohio, whether those measles outbreaks get under control, they tip, and we start to see many more cases accelerate in those states as well, and see a similar situation to what we're seeing in West Texas. The WHO put out a warning over the weekend giving ex-U.S. travelers a travel advisory about coming into the United States, and this may well be the year that we lose our measles elimination status. We have to get this outbreak under control within the next 10 months or so to make sure we don't lose our measles elimination status, which could have some profound impacts on advisories related to travel to the United States. I don't think we're headed into a good place. Look, the one piece of objective evidence that we have from Secretary Kennedy's tenure was he took down a front-facing campaign to try to get people vaccinated, to try to encourage people to get vaccinated for the flu. in the setting of the worst flu outbreak probably in 20 years. And so he has been very focused on dismantling components of the vaccine enterprise in this country. Peter isn't just the only casualty of that. He's canceled grants. He's canceled educational campaigns. He's canceled studies into new vaccines. He's canceled studies into vaccine hesitancy. He canceled the FDA AdCom that did the strain selection for the new flu vaccine for next season. So he's been very focused on this even early into his tenure. Really what's defined his first month in office or 2 months in office has been his advocacy on trying to take down different components of the vaccine enterprise. And so I would expect that focus to continue.
Secretary Kennedy says that he's not interested in dismantling the vaccination programs, but that he wants to look into issues surrounding it and make sure that he's seeing the real truth. Do you believe him?
Well, look, he appointed, or there's been reports in the Washington Post and separately in the New York Times that he appointed 2 people who are being called vaccine skeptics by the New York Times and the Washington Post to look into the purported link between the MMR vaccine in particular and autism, something that's been thoroughly studied in the past and has been debunked by some very large and rigorous outcome studies. These individuals who he's appointed, one of them has been associated with an effort to use Lupron, the drug Lupron, as a treatment for autism, for some purported link between allegedly vaccines and autism. That's effectively chemical castration. What you're doing is suppressing testosterone in children. And this was the individual who seems to have been, based on the public reporting in the Washington Post and New York Times, appointed or brought in to conduct that vaccine study. So, he's bringing in people, I think, who have a similar point of view. Now, what he would argue is the only way to fully debunk the link that he believes exists between MMR vaccine and autism is to bring in people who believe in that link. And then he would say if they can't prove it, then it must not be true. And so that seems to be what he's doing. I think this is going to cast a cloud over things for a prolonged period of time and create a lot of uncertainty by continuing to perpetuate these things, even after we've studied them really thoroughly over many years.